At one time, India used to be the richest country in the world. But what happened after that to India? And is it possible for India to regain that legacy? And how? If you want to know, please watch this video until the end. And also welcome to Amazing Facts. Back in the 17th century, India consisted of 25% of the world's GDP, with GDP per capita income highest among all. During that time, most parts of India was ruled by Mughals. India was the most important manufacturing center for international trade. Key industries included textiles, shipbuildings, and steel. Processed products included cotton textiles, yarns, thread, silk, jute products, metalware, and foods such as sugars, oils, and butter. 90% of the world's diamonds were supposed to be cut and polished in India. In 1600, Elizabeth I signed on the royal charter granted to a group of adventure merchants, later known as the East India Company, to trade with India. Firstly, in 1640, a company representative succeeded in securing land in southern India, Madras, now known as Chennai. After this, more and more forts and settlements were owned by the company, and they started getting profit as they became a leading exporter of spices. Before the 18th century, Mughal Empire was ruling not just the majority of India, but also parts of modern-day Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. But East India Company started getting involved in Indian affairs. After the 18th century, Mughals suffered from repeated invasions by Persians, Afghans, and other Indians. As the Mughals weakened, the Maratha kingdom in the central west of India emerged out as an empire of its own. Now, India was ruled by different kings during the weakened Mughal era, so it became easy for the British to divide and conquer India. The company also started to increase trade with India. They also spent their profits to raise a private army to contend with the Maratha Empire. They also transported more and more men to India, and the company's military also invested in its growth. They also won many rulers to their side, as they were being benefited financially from their dealings with the company, as they did not perceive their sovereignty to be at risk from the Europeans. Finally, under the dauntless Robert Clive, the British East India Company army was able to defeat the Bengalis at the Battle of Plassey during the 7 Years' War, which by the 1760s allowed them to assert control over much of the Indian subcontinent. British advanced deep into the country. It encountered resistance from many empires, but after large number of wars, Company was able to conquer an empire greater even than that of Akbar. And in the middle of the 19th century, power was shifted from British East India Company to British itself. Now India was being controlled by British Crown directly. And as the 19th century continued, India's resources and the livelihoods of its people were exploited to fuel the Industrial Revolution in Britain, leading to a series of famines that shook the Indian economy to the core and left millions of Indians dead. And at the time of independence, India only owns about 3% of the world's GDP and currently owns about 7% of the world's GDP. So is there any way through which India can regain its glory? So yes, one way has been paved up after this COVID-19 pandemic. Let us know how. Currently, China is the main manufacturing center in the world, with manufacturing about 1/3 of the total products. In the 1980s, China began shifting its economic policy from communism to capitalism. Soon, they started to build massive ports and factories to maximize their productivity and efficiency at a lower cost compared to the rest of the world. After then, foreign trades started in China, exploding the economy in the 1980s. Many Fortune 500 companies began having their products manufactured in China because China could make their products with a similar level of quality, but the price was very low. China's price was this low because of the extremely low wages of Chinese workers. And also other factors were tax laws and import-export efficiencies. So all of a sudden, if a competitor chose to manufacture their products outside of China, they simply could not compete with Chinese products at the same price. And by the 2010s, China was manufacturing about 1/3 of the total world's product. And within the span of 50 years, China had turned itself from an improvised nation of farmers to a nation that has the second largest economy in the world, behind the United States. Despite all of this success, there have been few changes in the Chinese economy from the past few years. As we have already told, that China was manufacturing its products so cheaply because the wage of the workers were very low. But all of a sudden, workers become very wealthy. In 1990, the average yearly wage of a Chinese worker was about $150. By 2005, it was $2,800. In 2015, it was $8,900. And as of this year, the average Chinese worker makes around $13,500. This is a massive increase in wage of workers of around 8,500% for the last 30 years. And what this seems today is that the cost of making products in China has become a lot more expensive than it used to be. We actually began to see a decline in manufacturing in China in 2006, where for the first time in the country's modern history, their manufacturing output actually decreased by 2%, but this is only one factor for the decline in Chinese manufacturing. As we are currently witnessing how the whole world is under lockdown due to the carelessness of China, many countries like the United States and other Western countries are showing their anger against China. For many countries, bonding with China has weakened as new viruses are kept on increasing regularly in China. China puts the whole world at stake for their own benefits. And also we have made a video on why China is the origin for most of the viruses. If you have not watched that video yet, you can watch that also. As most of the countries were highly dependent on China for products, but after this huge lockdown, the lack of import and export from China, whole world is suffering from a shortage of essential goods and products. After this, many countries realized that they have put their all money in one place. China is the second largest exporter of drugs, medicine and other things. So there have been shortages of essential medicines in many countries. So after all this, it is expected that there will be more decline in the Chinese trades with other countries. However, this is not guaranteed, but still due to this India have a fair chance to be the next economic power. As India has the largest population in the world after China, it has capability to overtake China in the coming years. The largest workforce with the highest number of youngsters may come in favor of India to become next economic power. India is still largely an agricultural society with very poor infrastructure. Roughly half of the workforce in India still works in agricultural sector. But still since 2002, India's economy has grown from a GDP per capita income of $470 to roughly $2,100 in 2020. And this economic growth has resulted in India lifting more than 300 million of its citizens out of poverty over the last 18 years. So this can be a positive sign. Being democratic also helps India to win trust and beliefs of other countries. Over the last 2 decades, China has been the hardware base of the world, while already India has been one of the software base. As of 2014, Make in India is also meant to propel India into trajectory of manufacturing exporter, resulting in India manufacturing about 10 million cell phones a year. But by the end of 2019, production has drastically increased to roughly 150 million cell phones per year and quickly became the second largest cell phone manufacturer in the world. With big investments from companies like Apple, BlackBerry, Samsung, Nokia, Sony, etc. who have begun making some of their phones in cities of India. So we might see an expansion of India's manufacturing sector. India's manufacturing labor cost in 2015 stood at $1.72 per hour compared to $37.96 per hour for the US. Even China's cost is almost double that of India. This can be a major reason for some companies to take a risk and manufacture their products in India, resulting in the growth of India as the new manufacturing center. And if more companies started to invest in India, the wage of workers will also improve, resulting in improvement of standard of living for Indians. However, these all things are not like walking on the cake. Factors such as lack of adequate infrastructure, misalignment with global supply chains, inadequate innovation have worked together to slow the growth and dynamism of Indian manufacturing. Advanced manufacturing technologies add another layer of complexity by posing a threat to India's cost competitiveness. Technologies that are not used by India are offering significant productivity gains, creating a new competitive advantage for countries that use them. However, if 1.3 billion citizens start to serve and work for the country honestly, we can add great value to India's development. As an individual, we can maximize the use of products that are made in India and boycotting Chinese products. We can help the government by paying taxes at the right time. We should contribute to the social welfare development of our country. Rather than our only own benefit, we can think of benefiting our country and its citizens. We should take care of our country's infrastructure responsibly and should also use it properly. With these small efforts on our own level, we can help India. However, all these things may not bring a sudden change, but slowly and steadily, India can become a new superpower. If India fixes its infrastructure and capitalizes on the manufacturing in the same way that China did in 1990s, we might see India become the true economic superpower of the world. But India is not alone in this race in becoming a superpower other than China. 2 other countries also have a great chance. These 2 countries are Vietnam and Mexico. Over many years, Vietnam is going through an economic boom over the last several decades. Back in 2000, Vietnam was a country with extreme poverty and approximately 100 million people were living under poverty. Its GDP was $390, which was very low. When China's wealth began to accelerate, then many apparel companies like Nike began building factories in Vietnam because it became substantially cheaper to manufacture some products in Vietnam as compared to China. In 2010s, Vietnam's manufacturing sector began to accelerate as well. Today, Vietnam is now considered a middle income country with a GDP per capita of roughly $3,000. And amazingly, this shift from extreme poverty to middle income has occurred within just 20 years, making it one of the fastest growing economies in history. Also, during this pandemic, Vietnam responded very quickly. Vietnam restricted travel and visas, quarantining people arriving from overseas, and ultimately closing its border. And today, Vietnam is free from corona before many of the world powers, giving this country an edge over other countries in growing its infrastructure, technology, and it is also expected that Vietnam will surpass the likes of United Arab Emirates, Singapore, Iran, Hong Kong in terms of economic power within the several decades. Another country that has benefited a lot from China's manufacturing downturn, especially over the last 2 years, has been Mexico. It is estimated that 2/3 of large corporations in the United States were planning on moving at least part of their manufacturing base out of China and into Mexico within 2 years. So Mexico is already becoming a bigger manufacturing hub of the world. It is expected that Mexico will be receiving between $12 billion and $19 million for manufacturing per year in the coming future. In 2017, Mexico's exports to the United States have increased by roughly 14% to a whopping $320 billion, and that is about 42% of what China exports to the United States. So they are still quite away, but they are gaining ground every single year. So what do you think? Who is going to be the new superpower in the coming 20 years? China, India, Vietnam, or Mexico? However, currently no doubt China is the most powerful manufacturing center, and it is not going to be dethroned easily and suddenly. But we can contribute to our country's growth by shifting towards the products manufactured in India and reducing the use of Chinese products. So that's it for today, guys. If you find this video informative and interesting, drop us a like down below. If you are new here, consider to subscribe and also share it with your friends and families so that they can be aware of this and can also contribute towards our country's growth. And take care until we meet again.